Welcome back, guys. We're on our last session of parables, and Pastor Nathan talked to you last week about the parable of the sower. And the parable of the sower talked about faith and how real faith produces growth in our lives, just like good soil produces a good, healthy, strong plant. This week, we have a great little parable to share with you that I think you're going to like.
I have a question for you. What would you do if you found something like this in the attic of your house? It'd be a treasure map. You'd get pretty excited. I would get pretty excited if we found something like this. I would be like, oh my goodness, where is this? I got to go track it down and find it and go after that buried treasure. People get really, really excited when it comes to finding treasure. And we're talking about not just kids. Grown-ups get all excited when it comes to things to do with buried treasure.
That's right. There's been lots of books written about buried treasure. There's even been some movies. And we even have a local legend about buried treasure, the Oak Island legend. And there's actually a series on TV. I haven't actually seen it, but The Curse of Oak Island, I think it's called.
That's right.
So it's pretty popular.
Absolutely. Now, beyond just a treasure map, imagine what would you do if you actually found the treasure. We have that moment when you think of the shovel going into the ground and chink, oh, I hit a chest. We get all really excited about that, all right? So, why are we talking about treasures? Because the parable that we're going to look at this morning is a parable that Jesus tells about a hidden treasure. And it's only one verse. Sarah, would you be willing to read it for us, please?
It's found in Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field.
That is the parable that we're going to look at together. This parable of the hidden treasure is one of my favorite parables of Jesus. And it's not because it's just one verse. Let's read it together one more time. Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure buried in a field that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. So, in case you missed it, this is what is going on in this parable. There's a man who finds himself in a field, and Jesus doesn't say exactly why he's there, how he got there. All he says is he's in the field. It's possible that he was just working in someone else's property, plowing up the ground or digging or who knows what he's doing. And as he's there, he stumbles upon this hidden treasure. What on earth was a treasure doing buried in a random field? That's a question that I've asked myself. And here's a little bit of history for you. I like history, maybe you do too. Back in Jesus' day, not everyone had their money and their savings in a bank, right? They usually had their money with them. And so what would happen is, as they're, in their house going about their business, they hear about an invading army, or maybe there's been a lot of robberies going on. So what they would do is they would take their treasure, their coins, and they would put them in a jar, and they would go out somewhere in their property, they would dig a hole, and they would bury it there. That was kind of like their bank, a place to keep it safe. And then they hope that when the trouble is past, they'd go out, they'd dig it up, and there they would have their money again. But what would happen if, in a tragic case, the person died before they were able to go out and dig it back up again? They were the only one who knew about it. Therefore, their treasure stayed hidden in the field or in the ground, wherever it was, for possibly a very long time. So, this man, he finds his hidden treasure. He gets really excited about it. He goes home, he sells everything that he has, and he buys the field so he can have the treasure. Now, once again, I'm going to ask you the same question we've asked 2 weeks in a row. This is the third week. What is Jesus trying to teach? He's not just talking about treasure for fun. And the answer is in the first 6 words. The kingdom of heaven is like. And he continues. Jesus is trying to describe for people something they've never seen before, something they didn't understand before. Have you ever tried to explain something to someone that they've never seen? Try this. Try explaining a color to a person. Imagine explaining the color red to a person who has never ever seen a color. All they see is black and white. It would be really hard to do. And Jesus is describing and explaining something to people to help them get something that they just don't understand before. He's teaching them about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom that he is the king of. So he's trying to teach them about something we know today as being a Christian. Now he doesn't really talk exactly how to become a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. What he's actually trying to do, he simply wants people to know that the kingdom of heaven is the most valuable, important thing that anyone could ever want. Being a citizen of his kingdom is the most valuable thing, the greatest treasure. And you know what? If I can be honest with you, I think this is one of the biggest struggles that we have today. I'm talking about grown-ups, I'm talking about kids, is that, especially in Canada, we have a lot of treasure. We have a lot of stuff. We have all the things that people need, right? We've got food, we've got water, we've got shelter, we've got family around us. We've got everything. And then we got a whole bunch of wants piled on top of the things that we want and enjoy. And because of that, we find it hard to even think about wanting to be a part of anything else. And Jesus wants people, including you, to see that there is a treasure that exists, that if we could see it for ourselves, we would take anything and everything that we have and we would say, I will turn my back on all of that to have this. It's bigger, it's more important, it's more precious, more valuable. I think you would understand this if one day you stumbled upon a chest full of gold coins and jewels. You'd be willing to give up all your toys, you'd be willing to give up everything that you have in order to get it. And you wouldn't do it and be like, oh, I'm going to miss this old stuff. You'd be like, get rid of this stuff quickly so I can have that. And you'd be excited about it. So, this is an exciting parable about the amazing kingdom of heaven that Jesus is calling us to be a part of. It's exciting, but it's also really urgent. You guys know what urgent means? It means it's super important to know about. Why? How is it urgent? Well, think about the beginning. He finds himself in this field that is not his, and the treasure is not his, and he needs to figure out a way to make it his. It's urgent for us. The kingdom of heaven is not ours automatically. We're not born Christians, are we? Maybe you're born into a family where your mom and dad and brothers and sisters, they're all Christians. That doesn't make you a Christian. We're not born into the kingdom of heaven automatically. Romans 5:12 talks about that. It says that we're separated from God because of our sin. Listen to what it says in Romans 5:12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, in this way death spread to all people because all sinned. We are not born into the kingdom of heaven where we have eternal life automatically. We're born separated from God because we're all descendants of Adam who sinned. Because of that, we are born with a sin nature. So we need to enter into the kingdom. How? How? Is Jesus telling us, if you want to enter into the kingdom of heaven, if you want to be a part of my kingdom, then you need to sell everything you have and give it away and be a good person and do all those things? No, that's not what Jesus is teaching, because then he would be contradicting so much of the other things, so many of the other things that he has taught, and would be contradicting so much of the Bible. Listen to this great verse in John 1:12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. How is it that we get brought into the kingdom of heaven? We become children of the King. How? By believing in Jesus. You know what that means? And this is the part that I really want you to get. I don't want you to miss this. This is the most important. The kingdom of heaven is entered into through faith in Jesus. Jesus already purchased our way into the kingdom with his perfect life and his death on the cross in our place. Jesus is the key the entry into this amazing kingdom. And you know what that means? That means if Jesus is the way to God, that makes Jesus the treasure. He is the treasure. And so I'm going to ask you this question. Personal question for you. Is Jesus your treasure? Do you love him more than anything? What if someone literally offered you $100 million, and they said, I will give this money to you if you will just promise to never think about Jesus again? Would you be willing to make that exchange? Would you take it? Listen, nothing that we could ever hold in our hands can ever compare with the unimaginable worth of Jesus. And that's what this parable teaches us, that he is the greatest treasure. All right, so there it is. We just finished finishing our series on the parables of Jesus, and as always, we are going to end off with a couple questions that help you to really get your mind going and thinking about what does this mean for me. I'll remind you one last time, we'll have a little pause in between the question and the answer, and so you can just pause it and talk about it.
All right, so the first question is, what if I don't want to know Jesus for myself? What's the big deal? So I want to read a verse for you. It's found in John chapter 3, verse 18. And it says, he who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. So this is more than just missing out on something. This is something that is very, very important. To reject Jesus is to actually welcome judgment from God himself. Jesus doesn't just give us a good life. He frees us from our sin and from the penalty of our sin. So it's not just about wanting Jesus, it's actually about needing him.
Absolutely. You're very, very correct. So important that we get that, more than just, I'll be missing out.
Yeah.
I'll have my own thing. Is that we're actually missing out on what we need more than anything. And here's the second and final question for you. How can you know, or I'll make it a personal question, how can I know if Jesus is my treasure? I think that sometimes the answer to this question, we kind of make it more complicated than it needs to be. Mm-hmm. We know this for sure. We know that we need to believe certain things about Jesus. So we need to believe that Jesus is God in the flesh. He came down. We need to believe that Jesus lived a perfect sinless life. We need to believe that Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and rose again for our sins. So we need to believe those things about Jesus. But we also know that what we believe about Jesus changes us. We talked about that in several of these different lessons with you guys, how that changes us from the inside. So one of the things that it changes is our hearts and the things that we love. So now the question becomes, first it's what do we believe about Jesus, but then it becomes, do we love Jesus? Do we trust him? And how do we know that? Well, when you love someone, when you love a person, when you love Jesus, you think about him, right? What Jesus thinks becomes important to us. We think like him. So one way that we can know that Jesus is our treasure is that we're growing to be more like him. Like that seed of the gospel that we looked at last week that grows up and produces something, what's being produced in us is we're becoming more and more like Jesus. So it's not as hard as you think. We know that Jesus is our treasure when we're growing in our love for him and our trust in him. That's the end of it. 3 weeks on 3 parables of Jesus. And we hope it's been helpful for you, and we are excited to meet back together.
That's right. Next week, September 27th, we are planning to meet here at the church all together to be able to have our children's ministry programs running. So we are planning to have Compass Kids. So we are looking forward to seeing all of you face to face next week. So we really hope that you'll join us.
All right. We will see you next week. Bye.